What's up, upstanders? Dr. O here, and it's been an amazing sight to see the amount of protests and rallies that have been taking place across the country. These hands-off events, and people thought it was a great idea to have the whole thing called hands-off, generally speaking, because it could be hands-off anything that really applies to you. Hands-off Middle East policy, hands-off of anti-trans rights, hands-off of anti-DEI efforts. The list can go on and on and on. Hands-off, tariffs in your hometown, and how it's going to affect your business. That's really important. And thousands, hundreds of thousands of people came together across the country to make their voices heard. That's important. That needs to continue. The town halls need to continue. The Democrats having town halls for Republicans who won't show up for theirs needs to continue as well. All of that needs to continue. There's no doubt about it. However, I go back to the words of the incredible Bayard Rustin, who was the main organizer of the March on Washington. And I watched a video of him in the 80s, and he said that we protested and marched because we didn't have the right to vote. And then he said something that blew my mind. When you have the vote, you don't need to protest. And so, look, if all of these protests are going to continue, great. It's all good. Absolutely not against that. No way, shape, or form. But to do all of this and to not come out and vote, and the only main thing we really need to change all of this is the vote, it's going to make all of these marches and town halls an absolute waste of time. And I'm going to go out on a limb and say that there's many people out there who protested who did not vote and did not vote for Harris. And they could have been at the hands-off rally because they wanted to have hands-off of these tariffs, but are completely fine with DEI efforts ending, right? They could have been at the rally because they wanted to make sure that their farms got support, and so hands off these tariffs, but they could have no problem with anti-trans legislation. And so when a candidate comes out who might support their farm rights but is pro support for trans rights, they may not vote for them. And that's the bigger problem. That's how Trump got over. That's how these Republicans got over. And furthermore, we saw that Trump has put out executive orders to seize control, basically, of the voting process in the United States. Yeah, these are the guys who believe in states' rights, right? But it's only when they want states' rights. Now he wants to take control of something that's supposed to be left up to the states, because he knows that when it comes to the midterms and when it comes to his efforts to stay in power and be in the third term and become king, he can't do that without controlling the voting. And so that's why there's 4 different organizations or lawsuits going against that right now. And people need to put their energy behind that as well. They need to put their energy behind making sure that as many people, because part of the voter disenfranchisement that Trump is putting out there is going to target people who don't have birth certificates or passports or other type or marriage licenses or other types of things that maybe make it difficult to prove their identity. They're going to target that as well for more voter disenfranchisement. And that's why people like, Elie Mystal's new book talks about, the need to just eliminate this idea of voter registration in the first place, because most countries don't have voter registration renewal and all of this other type of stuff. Once you're a voting age, you're on the roster permanently. But as he mentioned, a lot of these voter registration came into place once Black people and poor people got more rights to vote. So that's where a lot of this organization needs to turn. It needs to turn towards protecting voting, towards joining these lawsuits, putting out more lawsuits, and on the flip side, helping as many people, poorer and disenfranchised people and non-white people as possible, get the type of ID and documentation that's going to be necessary, because their votes are going to be challenged in every way, shape, and form. So if Dr. Madison, late Dr. Madison, quoted a lot. He says, there's a difference between a moment and a movement, and a difference between a moment and a movement is sacrifice. These protests and these rallies are great moments. What Senator Booker did was great. But if we don't get the voting efforts, what he did, it's just going to be a moment. The win in Wisconsin, that's voting. That's a voting thing that happened in Florida when we closed the margins, and what happened with the 2 congressional votes down there. That's the movement, right? And so we just can't let up the gas. We just can't let up on the gas. We have to have these marches and stuff, but the main energy and effort needs to be centered around voting, making sure that the voting is happening, make sure the voting disenfranchisement is not happening, making sure that people are getting the IDs and birth certificates and things that are needed as to the best of our ability. Can't get it for everybody. But those of y'all who have the ability to vote, and y'all get out there and make your voices heard in your marches and stuff, but then you set out this election because this person isn't charismatic enough for you, or you don't like their foreign policy, or you don't like this, or you don't like that, and you're going to become a single issue voter. The single issue needs to be democracy. And people got on Vice President Harris for running on democracy, but now you see it's about to disappear. Or it's disappearing. Not about to disappear, it's disappearing, because democracy doesn't die in darkness, it dies in the light of day. And so we got to get out here and organize voting. All of the special elections are going to happen between now and the midterms. And then the midterms are going to be absolutely critical. So I hope there's more candidates getting out there, going to be running, getting out there, going to be challenging and all of that. March. But march to the polls as well. Because without that, all of these exercises are going to be exercises in futility. And we got to do better. We got to do more. So let's keep doing more. Peace.